Ancient Egypt was one of the most elaborate and distinct cultures that we have ever seen in the ancient world. The inhabitants of the Nile River Valley created a land of unbelievable art and structures that seem almost impossible to imagine even with today's modern technology. Because of this, the ancient Egyptians left us with an incredible number of mysterious artifacts to attempt to interpret for clues about that powerful culture that reigned supreme for thousands of years. So today, here at Unexplained Mysteries, we'll be taking a look at mysterious Egyptian discoveries and what they might teach us about the incredible culture of the ancient Egyptians. The Tully Papyrus. While it is no secret that many mysterious and almost otherworldly events occurred in ancient Egypt, most do not think of UFO sightings being among such events. However, the Tully Papyrus would seem to prove otherwise. Found in an antique shop in Cairo and then copied out rather than being purchased by Alberto Tully in 1933, the claims contained in the scroll made waves throughout the world. Although the copy was then recopied several times over before translation, making its accuracy as well as authenticity suspect, the papyrus nevertheless took off among believers as an ancient record of flying saucers and some of the best evidence of alien life. The beginning lines read, as translated by R. Cedric Leonard, "In the year 22 of the 3rd month of winter, 6th hour of the day, it was found that a strange fiery disk was coming in the sky. It had no head. The breath of its mouth emitted a foul odour. Its body was 1 rod in length and 1 rod in width. It had no voice." The translation then continues, saying, "After several days had passed, they became more numerous in the sky than ever. They shined in the sky more than the brightness of the sun, and extended to the limits of the 4 supports of heaven. It was after the evening meal when the discs ascended even higher in the sky to the south. Fish rained down from the sky, a marvel never before known since the foundation of the country, and it was ordered that the event will be recorded for His Majesty in the annals of the House of Life, to be remembered forever." Analysis of the complete text of these translations made scholar Prince Boris de Rashevitz suspect that the original papyrus was part of the annals of Thutmose II, an idea that immediately took off within the UFO community, although there is nothing that mentions Pharaoh Thutmose by name. However, if Prince Boris is to be believed, the papyrus text would then date back to around 1400 BC. At this point in ancient Egypt, the highly advanced civilization was incredibly adept at understanding the workings of astronomy and was familiar and knowledgeable about celestial happenings to such an extent that we can reasonably assume that, if the papyrus is indeed legitimate, what they were seeing was not just an astronomical display that they did not understand, and so attributed to be unexplainable fiery disks. Unfortunately, several aspects call the authenticity of the papyrus into question, not the least of which is the fact that the actual existence of the papyrus itself is only alleged. What we have based our assumptions on is a modern-day translation of an Egyptian document that has never been rediscovered, or even confirmed to have ever existed in the first place. The authenticity of the entire operation is hinged entirely on the reliability of Alberto Tully and his copied-out version of the papyrus. Until the original document is found and its authenticity confirmed, we will likely never know truly whether or not the ancient Egyptians really did witness a fleet of UFOs flying across the Nile River Valley. Therefore, the search continues. The unfinished Egyptian obelisk. There has been a large number of impressive monuments that were constructed in ancient Egypt. Today, we're going to talk about one you may not have heard of, but it is equally impressive. More than 3,500 years ago, it's thought that construction started on what would have been a colossal 42-metre-tall obelisk had its construction been completed. This never happened, however. In Aswan, Egypt, it is theorized that Hatshepsut, a female pharaoh at the time, had ordered this mammoth monument to be created out of granite. An obelisk is a tall monument usually constructed outside ancient temples. They have 4 sides and taper off towards the top. A lot of obelisks have remained standing throughout history because they were so impressive. Civilization was so taken aback by these monuments that even thousands of years later, many of these ancient obelisks still remain to this day. The ancient obelisk found in Aswan, dubbed the unfinished obelisk, was never completed. Due to the sheer size of this particular monument, it would have been the tallest there was at the time by some margin. The large piece of granite it was being formed from cracked as it was freed from the bedrock. It is clear that after this crack formed, construction was stopped completely. However, the site of the obelisk is now an open-air museum that you can visit. This particular monument has allowed us to uncover some of the more interesting secrets of ancient Egyptian architecture, as the monuments themselves were actually carved into bedrock. The monuments still left are very much impressive feats of engineering and construction, so for carving them straight out of bedrock to be a common practice at the time is even more mind-blowing. Furthermore, stone balls known as dolerite balls were used to continuously hit the monument to remove any kind of imperfection. The unfinished obelisk shows us that they would have used the very interesting method of carving small holes in the stone and then would fill these holes with dry wood. This dry wood was then continuously doused in water until the expanding wood would break the monument free. The obelisk itself is an incredible engineering feat, obviously, but if it were completed, what kind of method would be used to put up the obelisk that finished, which would have weighed over 1,000 tons? How would they have been transported? This is potentially even more impressive than the monument itself. Nowadays, transporting this kind of monument would require a huge amount of planning. The Lost Labyrinth of Egypt. The impressive pyramids and massive structures that line the banks of the Nile River have long baffled historians and tourists alike, and we can only guess at how the ancient civilization managed to complete such enormous marvels of engineering. But this puzzlement does not stop at our own time period. Records of visitors professing their astonishment at Egyptian construction date back even thousands of years. In fact, some of these records indicate that at one point there might have been a structure even more impressive than the pyramids to behold. Many ancient visitors to Egypt described an incredibly sprawling temple complex that they referred to as the labyrinth due to its twisting corridors and hallways so intricate that one would only be able to successfully navigate the interior in the company of a knowledgeable guide. This labyrinth was documented in writings beginning in the 3rd century BC and continuing through the 1st century AD by ancient authors as well as ancient Greek historian Herodotus, who wrote of his experience visiting Egypt. This I have actually seen, a work beyond words. For if anyone put together the buildings of the Greeks and display of their labours, they would seem lesser in both effort and expense to this labyrinth. Even the pyramids are beyond words, and each was equal to many and mighty works of the Greeks, yet the labyrinth surpasses even the pyramids. The varying accounts, although occurring centuries apart, are all relatively consistent enough to allow us to paint a general picture of what the structure might have looked like. However, none of these accounts indicate whether the passages were maze-like as a deterrent to intruders or as a show of the wealth and power of the Egyptians. The labyrinth was said to contain over 3,000 rooms elaborately decorated with hieroglyphs and paintings of impressive beauty. Generally, descriptions indicate that the structure consisted of 12 complex courts surrounding an elaborate maze at the centre, with a roof made out of a single stone slab, a feat almost impossible to imagine even with modern technology and equipment. One aspect that is not agreed upon in the many accounts of this fantastical place is the reason for constructing such an immense project. Among the alleged purposes are a tomb, a temple, a gathering place for religious ceremonies, or simply a testament to Egypt's power and greatness. Although the many independent accounts leave no doubt as to whether such a structure existed, archaeologists have yet to find such a location, despite identifying several potential sites for further excavation. Sealed ancient coffins in Egypt. Ancient Egypt has drawn the interest of humans for as long as the pyramids have stood on the desert sands of Giza. The fascinating world of pharaohs, hieroglyphics, and ancient gods has pulled interest from everywhere, ranging between the scientific and the conspiratorial. So it came as no surprise that the world would listen in awe when in September 2020, authorities in Egypt revealed the news that they had uncovered 13 ancient coffins, all of them totally sealed and left untouched for the past 2,500 years. Following a press conference from the Egyptian Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities, a huge collection of ancient coffins was uncovered in Sakara, a desert and ancient burial ground in the northernmost region of the country. Sakara is an ancient necropolis composed of vast tomb systems hailing back to the peak of ancient Egyptian culture. The giant burial ground was used as a site to bury the deceased of the nearby city of Memphis, which was the capital city of ancient Egypt. The site is no stranger to amazing ancient artifacts, as Sakara is home to mummies, monuments, and even pyramids. Yet what makes this recent discovery so important is these recent finds are in an unbelievable state of preservation. Only housed in wooden coffins, these mummies stand out from the thousands of other surrounding human remains because of their immaculate condition. Being completely sealed from any outside elements plays a large part. According to the release by the Egyptian ministry, the coffins were initially discovered on top of one another, hidden within a burial shaft that reaches 36 feet underground. As a testament to their condition, some of the coffin's delicate paintwork can still be seen, with pigment still visible after thousands of years of wear. The age of these remains means that the significance is even greater. Over the years, looters and opportunists from different periods have ransacked ancient burial grounds in hope of uncovering priceless treasures. In a gargantuan necropolis such as Sakara, this means finding remains that have been untouched since burial are fairly rare. Work has only just begun, but researchers hope to find out more about the people buried in these coffins, along with their status in ancient Egyptian society. With such well-preserved specimens, scientists can hope to glean a significant amount of new information from these coffins, hopefully allowing our understanding of the ancient civilization to grow even wider. Currently, the ministry is preparing promotional videos on the exciting find, and we can hope that the discoveries may end up in a museum that is open to the public in the coming years. Tomb of the Silver Pharaoh Susen I. The tomb of King Tutankhamun is well known as one of the most lavish tombs of an ancient Egyptian pharaoh yet discovered. However, his is not the only example of a decadent burial place. Susen I, a little-known pharaoh who ruled from 1036 BC to 939 BC, ruled during the unstable and divided Third Intermediate Period in Egypt. A member of the 21st dynasty, he controlled a weakened Lower Egypt and was thought to not hold much significant power. Because of this, historians generally neglected the potential location of Susen's burial place in the search for more prominent tombs, an assumption that turned out to be entirely false. In 1939, French archaeologist Pierre Montet stumbled upon the pharaoh's tomb entirely by accident. Nobody had even considered that there could be such a major tomb in the area, and what was inside the tomb was even more astonishing. Decadent jewels, gold, precious metals, and ritual objects were only secondary to the totally unique, exquisitely detailed silver sarcophagus that contained the mummified body of the underappreciated ruler. However, even after the discovery of such a magnificent tomb, the importance of Susen was once again overlooked as World War II broke out and the riches were all but forgotten as Europeans turned towards the conflict threatening their homeland. Once further study of the artifacts and components of the tomb could be resumed, what archaeologists found let them know that Susen was not as insignificant as they might have once thought. The most striking element of the discovery was the silver sarcophagus, which remains the only example of a silver sarcophagus ever found and was crafted with such detail and skill that many consider it to be one of the most outstanding examples of ancient Egyptian metalworking ever discovered. While gold was considered the flesh of the gods and was readily available in Egypt, Silver was regarded as the bones of the gods and had to be imported from far-off lands, making it even more valuable than gold. The amount of silver used in the sarcophagus makes it easily one of the most expensive items ever found inside of an ancient Egyptian tomb. Fine metalworking also required a substantial amount of manpower, especially when crafting numerous or very large objects. Based off of the amount of luxurious silver items and the sarcophagus found in the tomb, archaeologists know that Susen was much more powerful than at first believed, possessing both the immense wealth and manpower to be buried in such state. Susen ruled for over 50 years, an incredible feat to retain power for so long in the time of intense political upheaval and war in which he was alive. This lengthy stint indicates that he was likely an incredibly influential ruler, who was able to control the flow of power, wealth, and loyalties in Lower Egypt during his rule, making it possible for him to be buried in a luxurious tomb like no other yet discovered. All told, the wealth and luxury found in the tomb of Susen is enough to rival even the tomb of famous King Tut, making archaeologists and historians realize that perhaps they were wrong in writing off the Silver Pharaoh as insignificant in the history books. King Tutankhamun, Warrior King. As researchers and scientists have used the remains of King Tutankhamun to paint a more complete picture as to the nature of his life, they have uncovered a crippling disease caused by the birth defects that arise from incestuous traits. Published back in 2010, the Journal of the American Medical Association found that King Tun had afflictions such as Kola disease, a rare bone disorder that causes the foot to form incorrectly, was infected with malaria, suffered from Marfan syndrome, and had a hormonal imbalance referred to as gynecomastia. It is due to these findings that many scientists and researchers claim that it was incredibly unlikely that King Tut was an active pharaoh in the realm of wartime activities, a duty held with utmost importance to the ancient Egyptian pharaoh of whom was expected to engage in battle and ride into war with his soldiers. Given the supporting evidence of the degenerative diseases held by King Tut, this theory proved to be the most prominent working theory for roughly the past decade. It was not until Egyptologists began sending the surviving artifacts of King Tut for proper analyzation with new state-of-the-art technologies that allowed new evidence to emerge that not only helped to prove King Tut was a far more capable general, but that the pharaoh himself had ridden into battle on more than one occasion with supporting evidence to confirm these claims. When researchers analysed metallic armour found in the pharaoh's tomb, they had originally believed it to be decorative in use. However, as reconstruction efforts were made to help piece together the old armour, researchers discovered a significant amount of abrasions and damage to the armour that pointed towards signs of use and wear in battle. Given this evidence and emerging pieces of murals and records that depict King Tut riding into battle on the back of a chariot, there seems to be a growing consensus that despite these prominent issues of health and pain, King Tut overcame his illnesses and fought side by side his ancient Egyptian soldiers. Did Kathleen Martinez find Cleopatra's lost tomb? Cleopatra is perhaps the most infamous Egyptian ruler. However, contrary to popular belief, she was not actually Egyptian. In fact, she was Greek, but she ruled over the Ptolemaic kingdom of Egypt between 51 BC and 30 BC. She was the last ruler of Egypt whilst it was in the hands of the Ptolemaic Empire before the Romans stormed in and annexed it as part of the Great Roman Empire. Cleopatra has been immortalized in popular culture to this day. Films have been made about her life, masses of literature written, artwork painted, and sculptures sculpted. She is best known for her manipulative involvement in the Roman civil wars, wooing Mark Antony away from his friend Octavian's sister, as well as being romantically involved with Antony's friend Julius Caesar. Despite Cleopatra's affairs with both men, she was seen as a symbol of beauty and perfection in the ancient world. Despite her seductive nature, however, mysteries still surround the last queen of the Ptolemaic dynasty. One of these mysteries is where Cleopatra's tomb is situated. Like most of the Egyptian rulers, tombs give a fascinating insight into the life of the ruler, who they were related to, and how much esteem they were held in by their subjects. Cleopatra is thought to have been buried with Mark Antony. Various expeditions have set out to locate Cleopatra's tomb, and the most recent theory as to where she was buried has come from Dominican lawyer and diplomat Kathleen Martinez. She believes that Cleopatra could be buried in or underneath a temple near the town of Tapissiris Magna. In the present day, the town is called Abu Sir and lies 28 miles west of Alexandria, where Queen Cleo and Mark Antony were said to have lived. Tapissiris Magna was a bustling port in ancient Egypt, with vineyards famed for their rich wines. Whilst there is a possibility that Cleopatra may have been buried here, some believe that she may have actually requested a secret burial. The ancient Egyptians were spiritual people, and Cleopatra may have wished to be laid to rest where no one would disturb her eternal life together with Mark Antony. The problem is that Egyptian rulers were not known for being buried in temples. Temples were places of worship, and rulers tended to request to be buried in great tombs underneath the sandy plains of the Egyptian desert. However, when Kathleen Martinez and her team began excavating, they found a shaft that led to a great cavern underneath the desert, which appeared to have been decorated extensively. This, they believe, could be part of Cleopatra's tomb. Some academics believe that Cleopatra's tomb is harder to find because it may have actually been robbed hundreds of years ago. After all, rulers in ancient Egypt were buried elaborately, with selections of expensive materials that would aid them in the afterlife. Cleopatra's tomb would therefore likely have been a decent place for any thief to make a bit of money. Kathleen Martinez is far from finding any real evidence of Cleopatra being buried in the temple, and thus the mystery goes on. For how long? We do not know. Mummification Workshop. Back in 2016, Egyptian archaeologists re-excavated a site at the Sakara necropolis, first discovered in the 19th century. Since then, a new discovery has been made, a mummification workshop connected to a multi-chamber burial shaft, full of ancient treasures and relics that gave an exciting new insight into burial practices. In the words of Dr. Hussein, the chief archaeologist of the project, we are standing before a goldmine of information. The site has been dated to the Sate Persian period of ancient Egypt, somewhere between 664 BCE and 332 BCE. The structure is rectangular and made of limestone and bricks. An open area exists with two basins, thought to have contained salt-to-dry deceased bodies. Other finds include linen bandages and an underground chamber of pottery with names of mummification processes engraved onto them. The process included taking the deceased person's innards and placing them into jars, drying the body and wrapping it. Many ointments were used during this procedure. It was expensive to mummify people, so only nobles and royals were given the option to be preserved. The workshop proves that there were different types of mummification for different types of wealthy patrons, with cheaper and more expensive options available. For example, a communal burial would have been cheaper than an individual private chamber. In the workshop, a gem-decorated mask was found, an extremely rare find as most tombs were looted long before archaeology became a renowned artistic science. The mask's owner has also been speculated, with scientists believing it to have belonged to the second priest of Mut, a mother goddess. The recently found relics are on display in the Grand Egyptian Museum, but this is not the end of the search. The discovery has prompted historians to continue excavating the site for more potential discoveries. Recent details shine a new light on mysterious pregnant Egyptian mummy. As much of our world and lives have been developing at a rapid pace, some things have been just as painful in ancient civilizations as they are now. Recent research seems to indicate that the first known case of an embalmed pregnant mummy that might have died from cancer. This mummy was discovered at the beginning of the 19th century in Thebes, Egypt. It was then in 1826 that the mummy was donated to the University of Warsaw in Poland, where it underwent a number of scans and analyses as it was studied. Following a radiological examination, the ancient mummy was determined to be pregnant at the time of her departure from life, being between 26 and 30 weeks along. The woman had been buried with a set of amulets and was, of course, wrapped carefully in different fabrics. The findings of this discovery and examination were published in the Journal of Archaeological Science in 2021 and reveals key details regarding the significance and interpretation of pregnancy within ancient Egyptian religions. However, the radiological examination also uncovered some further details, including changes in the craniofacial bones. The researchers explained that this aligns with the changes we have observed in patients with nasopharyngeal cancer, a cancer that originates around the nose and throat. Adding further evidence to the possibility that this pregnant mummy did indeed suffer with cancer was that the scientists at the University of Warsaw, when they performed a CT scan, saw in the images what was later identified as a possible small tumour located behind the left eye orbit. After researchers discovered this potential tumour, it was said that the changes seen along the woman's bones could have been what ultimately led to her fate when she was aged between 20 and 30 years old. Researchers have said that this type of cancer is vastly more common in some specific regions within East Asia and Africa than it is anywhere else. It was also said that this woman may have had a strong genetic predisposition to getting this type of cancer, though a number of environmental factors such as viruses or her diet could have also played a key role, though we cannot determine the extent to which these factors were important. In a discussion regarding the influence of the environment, scientists pointed out that many of the factors in our modern lives that increase the chances of developing cancer are not exactly applicable to this woman's life in ancient Egypt. For example, she would not have been exposed to cigarette smoke or strong alcohol, such as spirits, as ancient Egypt only saw beer and wine. In our modern lives, secondhand smoke, lower air quality, and other similar circumstances can all increase our cancer risk, though the disease is, of course, not confined to these elements of life. The team plans on conducting histopathological examinations, during which they will be able to definitively confirm that this mummy did have cancer or not. This will then allow the team to look at the cancer on a small scale, down to the cellular level and at a genetic stage. It's hoped that research like this will provide some insight as to how cancer has affected various patients over centuries and millennia. In the instance of this particular study, the use of a mummy is incredibly valuable, as the tissue, though ancient, is preserved. It is therefore hoped that the mummified internal organs, alongside these genetic and molecular tests, will bring us one step closer to understanding this awful disease.
13 mysterious mummies discovered in Egyptian well. Ancient Egyptians were known for the incredible care, craftsmanship, and wealth that they invested in the burial of their rulers. However, not all residents of Egypt were quite so elaborate in the locations of final resting places. Recently, 13 ancient coffins were discovered stacked inside a burial well in the ancient necropolis of Sakara. Although they have not yet been opened to discover who might lay inside, the 2,500-year-old wooden coffins are so well preserved that their intricately painted, multicolored designs are still visible. They also still retain their original seals, indicating that grave robbers or weather has likely left the contents of the coffins entirely undisturbed. Sakara is an expansive desert necropolis and pyramid complex that borders the first Egyptian capital of Memphis and is the site of many ancient burial locations, including the famous Step Tomb, which is the oldest complete stone building complex known in history, as well as a number of other mastaba tombs, several of which belonged to pharaohs. Although these coffins were not found in a magnificent pyramid, their incredibly well-preserved state will provide valuable information about the lives and fortunes of those who were not wealthy enough to secure such a lavish final resting place. The burial well in which the discovery was made descended 40 feet into the ground, with the coffins stacked on top of one another. Archaeologists hope that as they excavate the site further, they will find even more pristine preserved coffins buried in niches lining the well. During the time that the inhabitants of these coffins would have been alive, Egypt was under Persian rule as part of the Persian Empire,
who invested largely in revitalizing the tumultuous empire, strengthening the economy and allowing the country to once again begin to thrive. These efforts also likely helped to preserve some aspects of Egyptian culture that might have otherwise been lost to war and upheaval. Hopefully, these finds can give us a glimpse into what life was like under Persian rule. Because of the large number of pharaohs and prominent citizens of the early 1st and 2nd ruling dynasties buried in and around Sakara, as well as animals and other human remains, finds in this region are carefully excavated and studied for the valuable information that they may contain regarding ancient Egyptian life and civilization. And these carefully preserved coffins are sure to be a treasure trove of information. It seems that the discoveries made about ancient Egypt are never-ending, and that we will be uncovering incredible wonders for years to come. In the meantime, we must continue examining and attempting to interpret what we do discover so that we can begin to understand that amazing empire that dominated the Nile River Valley for so long. But what do you make of these Egyptian discoveries? Be sure to let us know your thoughts in the comment section below and help us by growing this community while working to solve these unexplained mysteries. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos.